The other day I was drawing, doing my usual thing, when I suddenly got a DM from a friend. She sent me a picture. Okay, not a big deal, it's probably a meme or something. Imagine the shock I had when I opened the message and I saw the very first drawing I did, which led me to where I am today. Now, I'm gonna show you guys the image, but I want to remind you guys that I drew this when I was 11, when I was just a little baby artist, so don't make fun of me. Okay. This drawing might not seem much. It's just a lineup of characters on a piece of journaling paper. But this drawing is everything to me. It is the drawing that led me to become an artist. These are the very first OCs I made. My very first dive into character design. Looking at it now, the art is not bad. Granted, there's a noticeable lack of hands and the anatomy isn't great. And everyone has the same face. But honestly, I like the colors and the style. It's not the worst. Designs though are a little all over the place. That's why throughout the years, I have redesigned these characters many times. Some better than others. God, you can really tell what anime I was watching based on some of these iterations. Even after all these redesigns, I am still not happy. Since these OCs are very near and dear to my heart, I decided that they would be the very first victims of my series, OC TLC, Original Character Tender Love and Care, where I would take my old OCs and give them the redesigns that they deserve. So with that, let's get started. In every iteration of my OCs, the story has always remained the same with slight changes. Back then, I would steal ideas from whatever anime or manga I was into and implement them into the story, but the plot was always the same. A group of 4 people is tasked with traveling across their land, fighting demons and monsters while also trying to deal with their issues. In their latest iteration, these people, Ryouta, Namito, and Kasai, were tasked with fighting demons. While fighting, they meet this girl, Lin, who reveals herself to be a demon. Lin starts as an antagonist but ends up joining them. Unfortunately, the team decides to disband because each of them had to either get revenge on some demon for killing their family or find their missing family members who were kidnapped by demons. How to give your OC's trauma 101. But before they disbanded, Lin reveals that she is connected to all their traumas, so in return for showing her kindness, she helps them achieve their ambitions. While this plot is kind of interesting, I want to write something that has a little more substance. In college, I learned that to add substance to your story, you should always put yourself in it. It makes the story more meaningful and relatable. You should also write about something that you enjoy. Okay, so I like it when stories take an established concept and twist it. Like how Ruby takes the fairy tale theme and makes it edgy. So let's do something like that. But instead of taking inspiration from fairy tales, let's look at Asian mythology. I always found the story of the Chinese zodiac to be fun and unique. Plus it gives me the excuse to make all my characters kimono mimi. So let's base it off of that. Oh, and let's make it shonen. After some more thinking, I came up with this. The story takes place in the Celestial Plane where the all-powerful Jade Emperor rules all. It was a peaceful place until the Lord of Shadows and his army of shadow monsters known as Yin Shen came. The Jade Emperor ultimately wins the battle between him and the Lord of Shadows, but it leaves him permanently wounded and the Celestial Plane in total ruin. Since the Jade Emperor is hurt and can't restore his realm, he turns to the animals for aid. He tells them that the first 12 animals to cross the Celestial River would earn a place by his side and would help him rebuild the Celestial Plane. The 12 animals to cross were the rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. To help them with restoring the realm, the Jade Emperor divides them into 4 elemental clans, air, water, earth, and fire, and grants them each a unique power called a gift, which is tied to their zodiac and element. They were able to restore the Celestial Plane, but not completely since the Yin Shen would continue to appear somehow. So in order to keep people safe, the strongest of the Celestials became guards, which are warriors sworn to defend the realm of any threat. Centuries go by and the Celestial Plane thrives, but there is still a need for guards. The story follows Liling Huolong and her journey to becoming a guard. During her training, she meets Namito Ji-Sul, Khanh Hai Khuyen, and Ryouta Kazatora. Together, the 4 of them navigate the trials of training, their struggles, and the challenges of growing up in a world that still holds shadows of the past. The main character is Liling Huolong, formerly known as Lin. Her role throughout the many iterations of the story has fluctuated. She started as a Mary Sue type of main character, then she turned into a princess of demons and served as the antagonist for a bit, but now she's returned as the MC. I've never settled on a design that I liked for her, and I think that's because I never had a clear idea of who she was as a person or the role she played in the story. But now that I've given the time to think about the story I want to tell and who Liling is, I can finally give her the look she deserves. As a fire dragon and the eldest daughter of a highly respected guard, Liling was expected to be intelligent, reserved, and poised. She never resented it since she was always told that her duty was to uphold the family honor. Even when her parents told her that she was going to be a part of an arranged marriage at a young age, she was like, yeah, okay. Since everything was decided for her already, she lived a very mundane life defined by tradition and honor. Her perspective on life changes when she and her brother get attacked by a Yin Shen while exploring an abandoned house together. She's able to kill the Yin Shen by using her brother's rifle, but almost loses her life in the process. When she regains consciousness, she realizes that she wants to do more with her life. She wants to protect people like she did with her brother while still honoring her family, so she decides to become a guard. For this revamp, I really wanted to lean into the fire dragon aspect of her character, because even though she wants to carve her own path, she's still proud of her heritage. So I gave her a chest plate that resembles dragon scales, a smoke motif on her sleeves and rifle, and made her horns and hair resemble flames. Another way that I leaned into the fire dragon aspect was with her Chinese-inspired clothes and accessories. Since the story is based on Asian mythology, it's only right to have Asian representation in each of the characters. I imagine that in this world, each of the zodiac's aesthetics/cultures would be inspired by a different Asian culture that believes in the Chinese zodiacs, which would be Chinese, Vietnamese, South Korean, Japanese, Singaporean, Thai, Nepalese, Bhutanese, and Cambodian. Since the dragons are inspired by Chinese culture, I wanted to add elements of that in her outfit. I gave her a Qipao-inspired top along with many jade accessories. In many Asian cultures, jade is believed to be a protective stone, so I like to imagine that Liling wears so many jade pieces to give her extra protection. Although there are a lot of traditional elements to her design, I also wanted to add some modern aspects because the story takes place in modern times, and make it functional since she's fighting Yin Shen. A type of fashion that I thought was the perfect inspiration for a modern, stylish, functional style was techwear. Techwear is a style that prioritizes functionality and adaptability, so I ended up giving all the characters a techwear-inspired look. Another aspect of Liling's design that mixes both traditional and modern is her weapon of choice, her lever-action rifle, Dragon's Breath. Since gunpowder was first invented in ancient China and requires a flame to be lit, I thought it made the perfect sense to give her a gun. I could have given her a cannon or a different type of gun altogether, but I just love the noise the rifle makes when reloading. For this story, I really want to avoid the characters just wandering around with no purpose other than fighting. So after Liling convinces her parents to let her become a guard, we will see her go through a couple of arcs. There would be an obligatory training arc where we would see her train leading up to the school's entrance exam. Then there would be an arc where she would adapt to life at Tianjin Academy and meet her friends. Once we have a good understanding of all the main characters, something would happen and would start the overarching plot. Now that we have our MC done, let's meet her companions. The first companion that Liling meets is Namito Ji-Sul. Namito has always been Liling's opposite. He's charming, friendly, cunning, rebellious, and a comedic character. The golden Labrador to Liling's black cat. Namjoon, or better known as Namito, grew up on a farm in the Earth Rat clan with his parents and two older brothers. Growing up, he was super short and scrawny, so the other kids called him Namito as a way to tease him. To prove to people that he wasn't just small and weak, he takes on the name Namito and also dedicates himself to becoming a guard. But when the time came to enroll at Tianjin Academy, he realizes that his family can't afford the tuition, so he comes up with a very convoluted plan to get himself enrolled. First, he steals another student's credentials to make himself more qualified and prestigious. Then, at the entrance exam, he cheats so that he could pass with flying colors. Lastly, he attempts to win over a school official. He does this by paying a kid to steal the official's watch so that he could return it and earn their favor. But the plan ends up backfiring on him because he realizes too late that he hired a real pickpocket. He manages to salvage the situation by retrieving the wallet and impresses the officials. With a stellar exam score and newfound connections, Namito secures a scholarship and financial aid. He makes it to Tianjin Academy not through privilege or luck, but through sheer cunning and determination. In most of his iterations, Namito has had a sporty outfit which fits his personality, so I wanted to keep that. It's funny, back then I gave all my characters these long, flowing coattails, but now I'm all about crop jackets. Along with showing his personality and how agile he is, I think the crop jacket, shorts, and leggings come together to make a very interesting silhouette. Namito's outfit is noticeably the most modern out of the four. I did contemplate the idea of giving him a hanbok-inspired shirt like in his past iterations, but I thought it looked too similar to Ryota's design. It also wouldn't make sense for him to wear it because he's the most rebellious and wouldn't wear traditional clothing. Thinking of his rebellious nature, I gave him back his piercings. It ties in with his rebellious nature, but also I just like it when guys have piercings. I wanted his outfit to have the most black out of his teammates because it ties in with his gift. His gift is what I call shadow walking, which is the ability to step into shadows. When he's in a shadow, he's invisible and can travel faster. The downside of this power is that it only works if the shadow is large enough to fit him. I was inspired by rats and how they mostly hang out in dark spaces. Even though his design is more on the modern side, I still wanted to give him a traditional motif. So I came up with this design that imitates a coin. It was inspired by the ancient Korean belief of wearing coins as amulets to protect the wearer against illnesses and negativity. Out of all his iterations, this one is the most different, which isn't a bad thing, but I had to change a lot about his backstory and who he is to get to this point. I was honestly really hesitant about all these changes since they were so drastic, but I think he needed these changes. He looks so good now. One thing that every iteration does have is his brown hair. I can't imagine Namito having any other color hair. It's just too iconic. I imagine that when Liling and Namito meet, they don't get along immediately. Namito would constantly tease Liling for being so serious, while Liling would scold Namito about being reckless in battles. But after spending some time together, they would begin to understand each other and get along. Then after a couple of chapters, the relationship would shift once Namito realizes his feelings for her. And with Namito done, we can move on to the next companion. Khanh Hai Khuyen is the sweet, playful, loyal, and strong water dog. She used to be called Kasai, which meant fire in Japanese. I changed her and Liling's name because back then, all my characters had Japanese names, which I just thought was cool at the time. This time around, though, I really wanted my characters to have some diversity since I myself am Chinese Vietnamese, so it's only right to have representation of my own cultures in my story. She has gone through a ton of different iterations, but she's always been the older sister of the group who keeps up morale. I don't have a ton of memory of her backstory because she wasn't originally my OC. My friend had designed her, but when we grew older and stopped having time to sit down and draw together, I decided to make my version of this character so I didn't have to rely on my friend for the designs. I essentially stole this OC, which is terrible, but I talked about it with my friend recently and she said it was okay. Plus, this character is vastly different from her original form, but that at this point, she's essentially a different OC. So here's a new backstory I came up for her. Khuyen grew up in the Water Dog clan with only her siblings, having lost their parents to illness at a young age. Their death hit her really hard and she ends up becoming a delinquent, skipping school, not studying, and committing crimes. Her life turns around when a teacher takes her under her wing and offers her support and a space to grieve. With the help of her teacher, she's able to turn her life around. When it came time to decide what she wanted to do with her future, she realized that she wanted to be a support system for others, like how her teacher was for her. She also really likes anime, so she decides that the best of both worlds would be a guard. With help from her teacher and her siblings, Khuyen attends Tianjin Academy with a scholarship and financial aid. Unfortunately, when she gets to Tianjin Academy, she realizes that it's not enough to clean her delinquent past, and her old enemies end up appearing. Khuyen was originally a sword-wielding firebender, which was a problem since Liling was also a sword-wielding firebender at the time. Then in her latest iteration, she was a fire-bending bow and arrow user, which would have been cool if Namito didn't use guns at the time. Like, why bring a bow and arrow if you have a gun? She just always seemed like an extra to the group rather than a part of it, which is why she never had a design that stuck with me. So rather than thinking of her as an extra, I want her to round out the group instead. Since Namito has daggers while Liling has a gun, this creates an opening for a big sword user. Using her sword, can deal a lot of damage while Namito does quick damage and Liling shoots from afar. I also think it would be a nice reference to dogs in mythology having swords like Fenrir and, this isn't mythology, but Inuyasha. I also decided to make Kan the healer of the group. Every team needs a support, which ties into both her personality as the big sister of the group and her blue color scheme. Since blue is associated with water, which is associated with healing, thanks Avatar The Last Airbender. But rather than using water to heal like in Avatar The Last Airbender, Kan would simply heal her teammates via touch. Her gift, which I've named Healing Touch, gives her the ability to promote faster healing through touch. This was inspired by the study of how dogs can heal depression just by petting them. Now that she feels balanced out story-wise, we need to balance her out through her design. I wanted her silhouette to stand out amongst her teammates. I explored her having a slimmer pants design, but I thought her silhouette didn't stand out enough, especially next to Liling, so I gave her these Hakama-inspired pants. I know I'm mixing cultures, but Kan canonically likes anime, so it makes sense for her to wear these. I wanted her to have more Vietnamese-inspired elements. I looked at Aoyai's, but I felt that those were too formal. In more research, I discovered this traditional Vietnamese top called an Ao Yim. I think I'm pronouncing that right. An Ao Yim is an undergarment, but I've seen it worn casually with either a skirt or a top. I thought it was a very fashionable and subtle tie back to her culture. This is a little more subtle, but I added this silver ring that was inspired by this traditional necklace called a king. It's the silver hoop that is typically worn with Aoyais. I attached it to this leather collar thing because I wanted it to look more casual, and because it links her back to the dog aspect of her design. The king also ties her to her weapon, which is inspired by this martial art sword called the 9-rod ring sword. In real life, the rings on the sword serve a couple of different purposes. The rings would make this ringing noise whenever the sword would move, and it would also add balance. But either way, it looked cool. I only gave her 3 rings instead of 9 because I am not drawing 9 rings every time. I ended up liking the 3 rings on her sword so much that I put them everywhere. On her pants, on her belts, on her ears, and even her jacket. To make sure her silhouette stood out even more, I gave her this wide sleeve jacket that slips off the shoulders. It also shows off her muscles, which I like. I thought a bit of armor would do her some good since she has to get up close and personal during battle, so I gave her these arm guards. The idea of making the toe of the shoes look like dog feet was taken directly from Miraculous Ladybug. I love this idea, it's so cute and clever, so I'm implementing it wherever I can. One thing that I'm still not sure of is the lotus on her pant leg. I wanted to show that she was a healer. Lotus is a symbol of healing, but it looks weird. But if I take it away, her pants just look empty. If you have any suggestions or if you think I should leave it, let me know in the comments. When Liling and Kan meet for the first time, they are immediate besties. I imagine that on the first day of school, Kan walks up to Liling and just starts a conversation, which would totally throw Liling off, but Kan would just eventually break her out of her shell. With Kan done, let's move on to the final companion. Ryouta Kazatora is the stoic, quiet, hard-working yet kind leader of the group, and my secret favorite. I've always just liked his quiet yet kind personality. Ryouta is an air tiger and the son of 2 highly respected guards. He started training to become a guard at a young age, hoping to one day follow in his parents' footsteps. One day, his mother returns from a mission alone. They had lost their father to a powerful Yinshen. He decides that day to become a guard, not only to honor his family, but to also become strong enough to protect the people he loves. Unlike the other characters, Ryouta has remained pretty much the same throughout the years. He was a water/icebender who wielded this giant hammer. Since water is already taken, let's balance out the team by making him represent the element of air. This might seem like a last-minute choice, it is, but this decision works well in the end. I decided to make him a tiger because the Chinese zodiac classifies tigers as powerful leaders, which I thought fit his personality perfectly. In his past iteration, he was the leader because he was the oldest out of the 4. I thought about keeping that, but realized that it would make more sense if he was the youngest, since his backstory states that he had been training for a long time. So rather than the group choosing Ryouta to be the leader based on his age, they would choose him based on his skills. Plus the scenario I imagined of Liling, Namito, and Kan finding out that Ryouta is the youngest made me laugh. There were a lot of design aspects that I wanted to keep from his last iteration. For example, his iconic spiky haircut that's seen in all his iterations, shoulder armor, pants, and boots. Since I had most of his design figured out, I just had to make him fit into this universe. I did that in a couple of ways, by adding his cute tiger ears and tail, adding Japanese-inspired elements, and by changing his color scheme and weapon. In my mind, Ryouta has always been a Japanese character, as seen from his previous designs. So I gave him this kimono-inspired shirt and added a magatama motif. Magatama are kama-shaped beads that originated in ancient Japan, but are still well-known symbols in modern media. You can see it here in Okami, Ace Attorney, Legend of Zelda, and Blue-Eyed Samurai. They are spiritual objects that represent good fortune and protection from evil, which Ryouta needs if he's fighting shadow monsters all day. The shape is also similar to animal fangs and claws, which ties back to his tiger theme. Since Ryouta is an air tiger, his color scheme had to match that. In this world, I imagine that the clan you're from determines your fur pattern. Since Liling is a fire dragon, she has red hair and horns. Namito is an earth rat, so he has brown hair, etc. So I imagine that air tigers would be white tigers because clouds are white. I wanted to push the air theme more by adding a bright accent color, but I couldn't determine what that color would be. In Western media, air is associated with the color yellow, but in Asian media, air is associated with the color green. I made some mock-ups and asked peers which one they liked more, and ended up with yellow. I'm a little sad that Ryouta doesn't wield this giant hammer anymore, but it's for the best. I thought the perfect weapon for him would be a pair of clawed gauntlets. It's a bit on the nose, but if it works, it works. Designing the gauntlets was hard. I had to think about how the gauntlet pieces would fit together to allow Ryouta to move his wrists and fingers, while also trying to make it match his design. They ended up coming out a little more Western looking than I wanted, but I don't mind. Since he's an air tiger, I wanted to come up with a gift that fits both themes. I came up with what I call Thunderous Roar. It allows the user to emit a powerful, intimidating roar, which makes anyone who hears it obey his command. I know this is similar to a certain JJK character, but it was just too perfect, and anime copy each other's powers all the time. Since was inspired by JJK, they also have very similar drawbacks. If Ryouta uses his power too much, his throat starts to hurt, and can lead to him violently coughing up blood. I also imagine that Ryouta would think it's morally wrong to use it, so he uses it very sparingly, which is another drawback. Even though Ryouta is the final companion that Liling meets, I thought it would make sense if they already knew each other, since both of their fathers are guards. Despite that, I feel that Liling would basically know nothing about Ryouta, since he is always kept to himself. So when they become teammates and start to know each other more, they find out that they share a lot of childhood memories. Ryota's backstory isn't fleshed out like the others because I feel that most of his development would come later in the story after something happens. Now that all the characters are done, let's look at them all together. Meet the protagonist of Heirs to the Celestial Guards. I really like how they turned out. The story and the characters are near and dear to my heart, so it's so nice to see them revamped. I hope one day I can flesh out these characters even more through a webcomic or something. I didn't want to bring this up until now because I was afraid that no one would see it while I was working on the characters individually. But there are a couple of design elements that each of the characters has that tie them to each other. For example, they all have a bright red accent that appears on one of their belts, their pockets, and their weapons. They also have at least one band that goes across their shoes. There are a lot more, but I don't want to keep you guys any longer. This was a hefty video, so let me know if you see any other examples in the comments. I'm working on full reference sheets for these guys, so if you want to see those, check out all my social media in the description. I streamed the whole drawing process, so if you guys want to be a part of the process next time, check out my Twitch. Thank you guys so much for watching this long video. I will see you guys next time. Bye!